Hey guys, it's Juan from Admiral Smurfs Gaming with another video. So today's topic is the Affliction Warlock. As you can imagine, this is not a simple specialization of the Warlocks, and this video is going to take a few minutes to discuss everything. We are going to talk about the core mechanics of the spec, the spells that I use, how the macro is made and how it works, and how to optimize the macro for the situation you are in. This is not meant to be a complete guide on how the class plays, but there will be some discussion about the structure of the macro and how it relates to spells when I'm giving my reasoning for how I wrote the macro. So before we get started, I do want to preface the video with a small explanation about how the Warlock class plays. So before we get started, I want to preface the video with a small explanation about how I view the Warlock class. First of all, I don't consider myself just a player of a single specialization. I play every specialization that Warlocks have to offer. I love the class, I love the lore, I love the demons, the features. It's a lot of fun for me. I've been making Warlock macros since Mist of Pandaria, and I swap specializations based on the fight, content, or even mood I'm feeling in the day. I would like to say that my favorite spec is Destruction, Affliction, and then Demonology in that order. My Destruction Warlock forum page has a bunch of good macros that I'll eventually incorporate here as well. Specifically, the pet macros will be brought in for the Affliction specialization in due time. I plan on using my Destruction Warlock macros for single target and 2 target scenarios. It can also handle good clumped up AoE scenarios when the mobs are very close to each other and not too much movement is necessary. Now, my Affliction macro is being set up as a macro to be used for 3+ multi-target, widespread enemy mobs, and heavy movement fights. I do have single target macros within my macro rotation, and I'll be going over those as well. Specifically, I want you to think of dungeons from Battle for Azeroth like King's Rest, Gahoon, the boss fight in Odir, especially if you're taking the charge of tossing the ball to the other players. It can be a very useful macro for you. I do have a Demonology macro, but that one has not been my central focus this expansion so far. That is my next project to get into when I macro Demonology again, and I have done one and I've spent a lot of time on it and I really still do like it, but that one will also need some fine tuning for raiding and dungeons, which I plan to do later on. Now, the Affliction Warlock has many talents, trinkets, and Azerite gear suggestions based off of the fights and enemies you're encountering. So I want to briefly discuss and mention my process for choosing talents, Azerite gear, and trinkets. Is it important that I state that any talent suggestions I have or that you see in my macros is based off of what I see as best now and best for me? This is constantly going to change based on the Azerite armor that I'm wearing, the nature of the encounter. To put it simply, there are a lot of different talents you would choose if the fight is single target with an ad phase, multi-target with a wide spread of enemies, multi-target with a clumped up spread of enemies. As such, your DPS will vary significantly from my test, and you need to find out what is currently performing higher than others based off of the gear that you currently have. To figure these things out, I use 3 main methods. 1, experience. I test it out repeatedly until I think I'm comfortable with using this over that, and I have my own reasons for that. But to get to that conclusion, I also use sim results and logs. So Log One Stop Shop is a website that constantly updates their sims on every Warlock specialization, tells me exactly what the best talents, Azerite gear, and trinkets are more based off of simulations. I review this website anytime I get new loot and before any difficult content that I want to do, because I want to see what is the best in slot gear that I have. The second website that I use is called warcraftlogs.com. Now this is very specific because I can go to exact dungeons, Mythic Plus encounters, raids, and see what other people are running, what is working for them in real time today. So that is my website to essentially, I balance the two out. What is simming best? What is logging best? And then I test it out and come to my own conclusion. And I suggest that you do the same. Now, without further ado, let's get into the Affliction Warlock macros. So my Affliction Warlock macros are split into 2 macro rotations, the Builder rotation and the Spender rotation. The Builder rotation applies to the standard dots on the target, and the Spender rotation applies the unstable affliction damage over time spell, and my other cooldowns on the target, including pet ability cooldowns. These two macros are very different and take mastery in order for you to optimize them to the best of their ability. These macros are intended to be used for raiding, Mythic Plus dungeons, Mythic Island expeditions, and even PvP. However, the PvP talents are not included. That's a different discussion, maybe an even different video. As such, they have been tuned with those contents in mind and do require a little bit of mastery and muscle memory to master. Once you do master them, I don't think you're going to ever stop using them. So let's start with the builder. So my builder affliction macro contains 4 versions. The version you choose should be based off of the enemy encounter you are preparing for. The spender macro only contains 1 version, so you're really going to only be switching to builder versions, and I'll show you how to do it in this screen. Basically, in order to switch from one to another version, you just have to go to the options menu of GSE of the builder affliction macro, and based off of what you are doing, change the version. So as you can see over here, you can change the raid version to 1, 2, 3, or 4. Same thing with dungeons, PvP, and you can even change the default to that. So before you go ahead and do the content you're about to do, just look at that, make a quick change based off of what you need. So let's talk about the specifics of each of the versions of the macro. So the builder affliction macro version 1 is a multi-target build that has drain life on the alt key modifier and does not contain vile taint on the alt key modifier. Version 2 is a single target build with drain life on the alt key modifier without vile taint on the alt key modifier. This is single target version is intended to be used with the ability Siphon Life, as is essentially recommended in most talent builds. Version 3, multi-target build without drain life on the alt key modifier with vile taint as its replacement within the alt key modifier. Version 4 is a single target build without drain life on the alt key modifier. It has vile taint on the alt key modifier with Siphon Life talented. So version 1 is used for multi-target rotations. Once again, the talent suggestions is based on the specific encounters. You want to see what's performing best through the sims and the logs. So version 1 is a sequential macro that will cast spells from top to bottom with no priority system. On the screen, we will see that what is contained within the macro. So the macro will cast Agony, then Corruption, then Phantom Singularity, then Haunt, then Agony and Corruption again. I want to mention what the first line cast sequence of the cast sequence is. It is cast sequence reset equals target, cast Agony, and then it casts Corruption. On version 2, it'll cast Agony, Corruption, and Siphon Life. And what this basically is doing is that every time you switch your target, it will automatically go back and reset to the top of the macro, which helps you a ton when you want to multi-dot. Anytime you switch target, the first spells are going to be cast off. And then to compensate for the reset on this, because I believe my macro, when I tested it, it kept on locking up since I put that in there, I added another sequence at the bottom of the macro so it can easily be recasted, those same exact dots, Agony, Corruption, and Siphon Life for the version that uses Siphon Life. And the net effect is that you pick a target, it casts your dots, Agony, builds, shards. You switch targets, it casts your dots, and then when you cast all the dots and you want to stick on a single target, you can just continue casting that macro and it'll continue casting the dots. At some point, you're going to want to stop this to start using the spender macro. We'll get to that in a second. So there is some pet flavor added within my macro by forcing my pets to use their resource more often. Blizzard's rotation of how often the pets use their abilities is a little bit lackluster, and you can tell that a lot of your damage might go up because you're using your pet's abilities a lot more. You want to keep your pet's abilities on autocast and have this at the same time. Using them both together is really good. For reference, my imp does about 2,416 fire damage. My fell hunter does in its shadow bite about 1,812 shadow damage. That's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage that you should not be ignoring. and it's on a separate global cooldown, so it hurts you nothing to spam it a little bit. So it's baked within the macro. Now, version 3 of the Affliction builder is essentially, the only difference that this has is that instead of drain life on the all key modifier, you cast Vile Taint at the position of your cursor. I felt the need to do this in a different version to minimize the errors that some people may have and simplify the macro changes you have when you talent into Vile Taint. So keep that drain life on your hotkeys because you may need it. Now, version 2 of the macro is essentially the same macro as version 1, but adds Siphon Life into the rotation. This is the suggested talent for most single target rotations. That's the only difference. Everything else I said in version 1 applies here, as in Seed of Corruption is on the control key modifier, Drain Life is on the alt key modifier, and the cast sequence is reset equals target, Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, then Phantom Singularity, then Haunt, and then it continues with Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, with Firebolt and Shadow Bite baked in there. Now, version 4 of the Builder Affliction macro, the only difference here is that instead of having Drain Life on the alt key modifier, you cast Vile Taint at the position of your cursor. I felt the need to do this, again, differently to minimize errors, and it's just easier. You don't have to input a new Vile Taint or like delete the lines or anything. No, just switch the macros version and then you're done. And that's the builders. You will only need to change the builders, as I only have one version of the Spender. Now, version 1 of the Spender Affliction macro. This is the macro that packs the punch and delivers it to. You need to stop using the builder macro while you use this. This is a priority list macro, which means that we'll always attempt to cast spells in a priority order. So the first spell first, then to cast the first spell and the second spell, then number 1, 2, 3, number 1, 2, 3, 4, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. This basically assures that when you have your big cooldowns, it will be using your big cooldowns the second it is available. Now, the key press over here is very different from the builder. For using these mods, you should stop using the builder macro while you have the Spender macro. And if you have everything dotted up with the builder macro, you will not need to use the builder again for about 13 to 15 seconds because Agony can last around 18 seconds. If you master this and you also master the pandemic feature of all damage classes, your dot will last even longer. So what is the pandemic feature? Just a side note. I'm going to quote Wowhead here, and we're going to go ahead and see what they say. So Wowhead says, maximizing pandemic is what makes a good Affliction Warlock. Pandemic is a passive that all casters now have that allows for 30% of the duration of your damage over time effects to be added onto a new dot when they are refreshed. Be aware that refreshing Agony is around 5.4 seconds remaining is the optimal suggestion. For Corruption, 4.2 seconds remaining is optimal. And refreshing for Siphon Life is around 4.5 seconds remaining is optimal. So that's why I say between 13 to 15 seconds of your Agony cast, you want to start recasting these dots. You get it in there, you add 30% of the duration to the next cast, and then you should be able to go into the Spender Affliction macro with a lot of power. When you cast the Spender Affliction macro, immediately you'll notice that the modifiers are different. My alt key modifier is Summon Dark Glare, and my control key modifier is Shadow Bolt. You want to use Dark Glare after you've unloaded a few unstable afflictions onto the target, because then this can extend all your dots. Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Unstable Affliction, all those. And then, in terms of Shadow Bolt, this is your main filler. I usually don't have a huge issue in terms of losing out on shards, but sometimes it happens. And sometimes you just need to cast Shadow Bolt. That's why it's on the control key modifier. I do not want it in the cast sequence anymore because sometimes it just chooses Shadow Bolt over Unstable Affliction, and I want to use Unstable Affliction as many times as possible. I will consider at some point testing and removing Shadow Bolt and instead of putting Seed of Corruption there, but as of now, with the current raid, with everything I'm doing, I don't really see too much of a need for that, and I could just have Seed of Corruption in a separate cast key. The cast sequence is very simple. It's going to cast your Dark Soul Misery, that's going to cast your Haunt, your Phantom Singularity, it's going to cast your Unstable Affliction, Then it's going to cast your Death Bolt. Then it's going to use your pet's abilities, Shadow Bite and Firebolt. It's a very simple macro. You spam the key and it does a pretty decent job. So that is my Affliction Warlock macro. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you let me know what you think about it. I hope you like and subscribe. I hope you follow this channel. This is a new channel for me. There's a whole new thing I'm trying to do here. I really am having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you guys are having a lot of fun watching it. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you guys until next time. This is Juan from Smurfs Gaming. Have a good day.